Today on Diplomatic Insight, Association of Foreign Relations Professionals of Nigeria reflects on the challenges facing democracy in Africa as it offers solutions at its 8th annual conference and lecture in Abuja. Vice President Kashim Shettima represents Nigeria at the AU Summit as the Executive Council grants Nigeria a permanent seat on the board of the proposed African Central Bank. Welcome to Diplomatic Insights. I am Oyebola Ajiboye. Welcome back. Democratic governance in Africa is declining. Faced with coup d'etats, military regimes, especially in the Sahel region, the need for strengthened democratic institutions across the continent to bring an end to unconstitutional changes of government is paramount. In a bid to deepen democratic values and fortify democratic structures across Africa, the Association of Foreign Relations Professionals of Nigeria, AFRPN, has convened its 8th annual conference and lecture themed The Challenge of Democratic Governance in Africa, Mega Trends and Leveraging Opportunities for Consolidation. The conference brought about interactions, deliberations, and discussions among diplomats, policymakers, academics, and stakeholders on the challenges of democratic governance and pathways to democratic resilience for a sustainable democratic governance solution in Africa. Notable speakers at the conference include Ambassador Bankole Adeoye, the AU Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, who delivered the keynote address. Professor Ibrahim Gambari, chairman of the occasion. Seriki Kano, His Royal Highness Khalifa Mohammed Sanusi II, the Royal Father of the Day, and Ambassador Ganin Lawal, the President of AFRPN.
The AFRPN has been involved in training of our upcoming diplomats and has delivered 2 free training and mentoring programs for our serving members in practical diplomacy and multilateralism. This is a rare feat by any professional body in its class. The association stands ready to continue utilizing the expertise and experience of our members to train our upcoming serving diplomats. We expect our relevant institutions to buy into these free training programs by way of encouragement and support. The AFRPN will continue to extend its hands of fellowship to other departments that handle governmental activities across the frontiers of the nation, particularly some that are domiciled in our missions abroad, to partake in our training on practical diplomatic nuances and protocol, which are essential in dealing with members of the public, both at home and abroad. Our training program continues to attract cream of officers from the 3 arms of the armed forces, from the ranks of Brigadier General, controllers, and directors from various services, as well as senior level career diplomats and ambassadors. Professor Gambari, the chairman of today's occasion and a patron of our association, continues to collaborate with us through facilities of his Savannah Center and lavishly offer his experience and expertise to support our training program by sometimes participating in class demonstration and case studies. We are very grateful for this clear gesture, sir.
Having these enormous human resources, young population, abandoned land resources, abandoned water resources, critical minerals, does not itself guarantee prosperity. And I want to share with you again another anecdote. In 1984, as a young foreign minister, Ambassador Adeoye testified, we received the then Secretary General of the United Nations, President Kure, who came to see Buhari, who was then the head of state. And Buhari asked him, Mr. Secretary General, we're just 1 week in office. We've just overthrown a democratically elected government. We know little about foreign affairs. You are the expert on world affairs. What would you say to us to do? And President Kure said, and I was present, he said, you know, what I'm about to say, don't take it wrongly. I'm from the third world country like you, Peru. But people used to say of Peru that Peru is a potentially strong and powerful and rich nation. But they have been saying that for the last 400 years. Let it not be said of Nigeria and Africa, that Africa is potentially strong and powerful and rich, and let them continue to say potentially. Your people cannot eat potential. You have to find ways to translate that potentiality into actuality for the benefit of the people. Otherwise, you will deepen the discontent. Now, the theme of this lecture is the challenges of democratic governance in Africa, mega trends, and leveraging opportunities for consolidation. This theme is both very important and very timely. And with respect to its timeliness, there's an ancient Chinese saying that says, may we live in interesting times.
We are living in changing times. It's almost as if all my life, the world has been interesting times. My earliest memories in foreign policy, I was within my house and my father would be sitting with Ambassador Olu Adeniji, Yusuf Bala Usman, Pierre Fulmont, and it was all about the liberation of Africa. It was about Angola, about Mozambique, about the anti-apartheid movement. Then later I got to university and we were talking about all the issues around the relationships between military governments, Western governments, the Buhari administration and the UK. Every decade, every few years, there is something new. So I'm beginning to think that maybe these interesting times are there forever, that we always, that we live in interesting times and will continue to live into it. After Trump, there'll be something else. So what is really before us is how to navigate and to remember that at every point in time, whoever is entrusted with our foreign policy will need to have that intellectual agility to respond to new situations. Obviously, the past will be a guide, and the experience of your princess will be important, and this is why this mentorship is important. But we really need to make sure that we have career diplomats who are up to speed. And I do hope the only comment I will make is encourage the government to provide those incentives for career diplomats. If there's one thing my father was proud of as permanent secretary, it was that in his time, every single ambassador was a career diplomat. He refused to accept a non-career diplomat as ambassador. And when you look at what they achieved at that time, decolonization, you can see what career diplomats can achieve when they're given those opportunities. I'm not saying go back to average 75% of our diplomats. And all the key missions, all the important missions should be manned by people who have been trained, who understand what diplomacy is. You know, you don't appoint a chief medical director who's not a medical doctor. You don't send someone to teach in the university if it's not studied, if it's not gone through university. How can we be so casual about our foreign policy? And it's been on for now 10 years, more than 10 years. We started from 75% career to 50%. Now I don't know whether it's 25% or zero. But honestly, we need to have someone who has the courage to say foreign policy is important. And if you remember, this was one of the fights my father had, resisting the convergence of foreign and home office. He still has an article in one of your journals, The Unfinished Business. Up till the end of his life, he was determined to see that we recreated the foreign office as a professional office separate from the home office. That is the only way you can continue to create the profession. So I think we need to continue.
Similarly, as part of our mandate to positively impact the foreign policy of Nigeria, we will continue to make available to the policymakers the result of our brainstorming exercise to guide our foreign policy options on a number of issues, ranging from the BRICS, the ECOWAS current challenges, reforms in the AU and UN, and Nigeria's quest for a permanent seat in the Security Council. Nigeria's economic and security challenges, the emerging global order, and reforms in the MFA as they affect staff development and post-service engagements. At present, the national interest of Nigeria is to build a strong economic base, fight insurgency and terrorism, decapitate corruption monster, and protect Nigerians in the diasporas. Therefore, finding resources to actualize this interest in the international arena should remain the cornerstone of Nigeria's foreign policy. In addition, AFRPN will continue to elaborate and promote the Tinubu 4D agenda, under which its foreign policy goals will be prosecuted. It appears to us that demography, democracy, and diasporas are the choice foreign policy platforms designed to accelerate the development of the country.
There's a Columbia University professor who was a Nobel Prize winner in economics, Professor Stiglitz, and he wrote the book Globalization and Its Discontents. But later on, it had to be followed with another book about the globalization of discontent. So it's not just about globalization stressing its values and a few discontent, but how the discontent, those who feel excluded from the benefits of globalization, have become globalized. The discontent has been globalized. Similarly, I'm arguing that democracy itself, which is one of the principal themes of this, is under enormous threat. But that threat to democracy is become globalized. Threat to democracy is globalized. So we have the globalization of economic and social discontent, and now because of the failure of democracy to deliver dividends, then you have the globalization of democratic discontent. Now, discontent, some people say sometimes hypocrisy is a bow to virtue. Discontent is a recognition of something that is better, that is not happening. And so I feel that there now has to be the complementarity of the globalization and the discontent in the socio-economic sphere and the globalization of the democratic dividends. And nowhere is that discontent with the lack of democratic dividends than in our continent.
Ambassador Adeoye noted that the youth are asking for pathways into work, into voice, and into leadership. The keynote speaker mentioned that when young people are celebrating coup, it should not be read as a rejection of democracy, but rather as an expression of deep frustration with stagnant systems and a yearning for change, accountability, and dignity.
Term limits in many of our countries. We have to see more of respect for global and regional continental standards when it comes to elections. The exclusion of women, youth, and the minority groups in any democratic political space is not ideal. This is what President Yoweri Museveni calls the politics of identity. We need to move to the politics of interest. The common interest on our continent is peace, security, and sustainable development. Only democratic governance can make that happen. We see political violence, parliamentary weaknesses because of lack of many factors. But what is critical is the legitimacy gap that is a key challenge. Citizens vote in many cases, but they feel unheard, like I gave the example of the Malagasy trader. People have expectation when they cast their votes. As their votes must count, they must also be able to hold the elected officials accountable. What is in it for me? What are the democratic dividends? Legitimacy must be the foundation of stability. And this is so critical because the more legitimacy we see in the democratic space, the more we can be assured that there will be changes for the better, primarily for credible, efficient, effective, independent institutions. Parliaments that are strong, that rely and defend the set values of popular sovereignty. Parliaments that focus on public administration that will support democracy to thrive. The rule of law is paramount. It is not a joke. We must remain in the realm of the rule of law for democracy to thrive.
Welcome back. Vice President Kashim Shettima has participated in the 39th Ordinary Section of the Assembly of the Heads of State of Governments of the African Union in Addis-Ababa, Ethiopia, representing President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. The Vice President joined leaders across the continent and beyond as delegates convene to address Africa's most pressing political and socio-economic issues. The summit is themed Assuring Sustainable Water Availability and Water Sanitation Systems to Achieve the Goals of Agenda 2063. As presented at the high-level plenary by Vice President Shettima, Nigeria endorsed the proposed institutional reforms in the African Union with a focus on peace and security, governance, strengthening democratic institutions, and ensuring stronger cooperation with international financial institutions and the private sector. The country also aligned with proposed restructurings aimed at boosting domestic and regional resource mobilization for affordable development financing and the adoption of a continental framework on reducing inequality built on credible data, social protection, productive jobs, and inclusive industrial policies, among others. Nigeria has been granted a permanent seat on the board of the African Central Bank. These achievements was disclosed at the 48th section of the Executive Council of the African Union. The Nigerian delegation, led by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Maitema Tuga, as well as in attendance, Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edo, recorded these significant diplomatic and institutional achievements. Nigeria's representation to the board of the Technical Convergence Committee of the African Monetary Institute, a precursor to the establishment of the African Central Bank, has also been extended.
However, we are concerned that the current approach could see us increase the number of personnel and associated costs without necessarily making our union fit for purpose in terms of outputs. On audit matters, we remain concerned over discrepancies in financial books, violation of procurement and contracting rules of the union, and low rate of recovery of loans to former staff and advance payments for service providers. Time has come to assist the new leadership of the AUC in ending this seemingly intractable impunity. We call on this council to adopt a timeline for all AU organs and institutions to fully implement every audit recommendation related to them without exceptions. On multilateral cooperation, we support the application of the Banjul formula in relation to the forthcoming Africa-India and Africa-Turkey partnerships. On the humanitarian situation on the continent, particularly the situation of IDPs, refugees, and other Africans in special situations, we commend the subcommittee and encourage it to also prioritize visiting countries in the Sahel and Lake Chad regions where similar situations also exist. On migration and returns, Nigeria wishes to point out that third country agreements with EU and EU member countries for some African countries to serve as hubs for rejected migrants comes with a very high risk of sowing the seeds of unrest. So-called offshoring of migrant processing and deportation poses a threat to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, as well as the AU's efforts towards ending statelessness in Africa. It would also undermine a common African position on returns and any standard operating procedure on return, readmission, and reintegration we may endorse here today. We commend progress being made by the AFCFTA Secretariat. However, we wish to underscore the imperative for the successful candidate for the position of Head of Division of Digital Trade in the AFCFTA Secretariat to be on board without further delay. We welcome efforts aimed at correcting the map of Africa as it is in sync with our new efforts towards the decolonization of knowledge on African affairs. The 12th century Al-Idrisi map, or Tabula Rogeriana, speaks volumes about maps and perceptions. I thank you very much.
On the margins of the ongoing 39th Ordinary Section of the Assembly of Heads of State and Government of the African Union in Addis-Ababa, Ethiopia, the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Yusuf Tuga, held talks with Baroness Jenny Chapman, Minister of International Development and Africa of the United Kingdom. Discussions focused on advancing preparations for the forthcoming state's visit of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to the United Kingdom and identifying new opportunities to deepen Nigeria-United Kingdom relations. The meeting also exchanged views on regional priorities, reaffirming shared commitments by both countries to sustained dialogue and stronger collaboration in support of security, good governance, and economic growth. Is Nigeria finally living up to expectations of its manifest destiny, not only of influence, but of power? That's all for today on Diplomatic Insight. Thank you for watching and see you next week for another interesting episode. Stay informed.